Your story is being written every second you take a breath. Every decision you make, every word that you speak, every lesson that you learn. You are a collection of the things you value, always in the process of change. Who are you becoming?
Are starting a brand new series today called Becoming. And so if this is your first Sunday with us, you picked a great Sunday to be here. We're talking about what we have all experienced, because all of us are in the process of becoming someone else. No matter how old we are, no matter what stage of life we're in, we are constantly changing. And all you have to do is look back 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years ago, and you're a little different than you were then. So that in and of itself is not a major discovery. And for many of us, the last couple of years have been marked by change. A lot of change. A lot of things have changed around us. And maybe some of those changes were changes you picked. Things you wanted to do, things you were excited about, things that gave you energy and life. And maybe some of those changes were things you did not pick. Changes that happened to you that you had to adjust to, that made you tired, that made you discouraged, that kind of drained you, so to speak. But all of these things together form the experiences that you've had over these last couple of years. And here's what we're going to keep coming back to throughout this whole series. The experiences you have drive who you become. It's the things that have happened to you and the things that, some by choice, some other things not by choice, that happen to you that drive who you become. Now, to be honest, there is another version of this out there. Now, I don't happen to agree with it, but I know that a lot of people feel this way. There's a lot of folks that feel like who you are and who you become is really tied to what other people think about you or say about you, the labels that they use to describe you. And we see this all the time with people that are influencers, people that are celebrities, people that are popular. We don't really know who they are. All we have is a perception of who they are. And so everything we know about them is a carefully guarded label or perception that they share, and therefore we begin to think that is who they are. The reality is, and you know this, labels can't describe a person. You can't describe a person just simply by a couple of labels or tags that describe them or describe their life. And again, I would go back and say, no, it's the experiences that you have that determine who you become, not what other people say about you. And I'll give you an example of this that kind of take it out of current day, because sometimes things get muddy when we think about life around us and what do I think about this and what do I think about that. Many years ago, there was a group of influencers, and they had drawn some perceptions and started to use some labels about a certain group of people. And when it came to this group of people, the way they described them was rather insulting, actually. They described them as superstitious. They said that they were atheists. They said that they encouraged incest, and they were suspected of cannibalism. And no, it's not QAnon. It's something else. Some of you got that. This is about circa AD 100. And the influencers were Suetonius and Tacitus. These were Roman historians. And they were writing about this peculiar group of people that they didn't know what to do with, that they didn't understand, but most people thought of them in those terms, as atheists, as incestuous, as all those other kinds of things, superstitious, all that went along with that. Those were the labels they choose to call the followers of Jesus. That was what the earliest followers of Jesus were called. Now, the followers of Jesus themselves used other labels. They called themselves disciples. They said they were followers of the way. They said that they accepted the term Christians, which was actually meant initially as a joke, as a little bit of an insult. It's like, who do you think you are? Little Christs? That was kind of a joke that they made. But eventually the followers of Jesus said, you know what? That's not a bad description. If people see me as a little Jesus, that's a good thing. And those were the labels that they used. Now today, followers of Jesus get some other labels, some good and some bad. And some of the labels that I've heard anyway, that I've come across recently, is that followers of Jesus are racist. Followers of Jesus are anti-science. Followers of Jesus are repressive. Followers of Jesus are too political. Those are some of the labels that some influencers use when they talk about Christians today. Now, if you're a follower of Jesus, you probably have some different labels that you would choose for yourself. You say, no, I'm not those things. I'm these things. So which is it? Is it the label? Is it the preconception? Is it the people's perception of who we are? What is it that really matters when it comes to who we are? And more importantly, who we're becoming. What's fascinating to me is Jesus was faced with this exact same question. And sometimes I think we don't give Jesus enough credit for how smart he is. Sometimes I think that, he was a nice guy and he went around doing good things. And I think we don't understand that he was actually the smartest person, the most brilliant person to ever walk on this planet. And Jesus, when it came to labels, it was almost as if he wasn't interested. He didn't care. It was kind of this idea that people are going to say what they're going to say, and they're going to think what they're going to think. For evidence of that, if you go and look at the life of Jesus, he was called all kinds of things. He was called a drunk. He was called a glutton. He was considered to be dumb. He was also considered to be self-righteous. He was considered to be simple-minded when it came to money. And all these other things. There were all kinds of insults hurled at Jesus. And it's almost as if, like I said, he didn't care. He did not care about how people labeled him, and he didn't care about how people labeled his followers. He was unconcerned about labels, but he was very concerned about something else. He was very concerned about your brand. Your brand. Now, I know when I say that, for some of you, you're thinking, oh, you mean like my social media brand and all, how I present myself and all that? Actually, no. It's the much more primitive version of brand. See, it used to be that if somebody was branded, it meant they burnt a mark into someone's skin. Or today's version of that might be a tattoo. It was a permanent mark. And while Jesus didn't really care about the labels, he cared desperately about the brand. As a matter of fact, in John 13, Jesus said this about the people that followed him. He said, there is one distinguishing mark. There is one feature about them that will stand out among all the others. No matter what people say, no matter what they think, no matter what labels they have, no matter what preconceptions they have, this is the thing that will identify them. And he says it this way, that we love so well. That we love so well. That will be your brand. That will be your distinguishing mark. Jesus cares about your brand, not their labels. He doesn't really care what everybody else calls you. He does care what marks you. And he says the thing that should mark you if you're a follower of his is that you love so well. When I hear that, I'm intimidated. Because I would much rather fight about, no, see, you've got a misunderstanding about who I am. And no, you don't understand. That's not really what Christians believe. And no, you don't understand that. I'm not in favor of that. I'm in favor of this. And I would rather try to explain and clear up all the miscommunications and give people the right perception and have them use the right label. And Jesus is over here saying, why don't you just make sure that they know you because you love so well? Why don't you let that be your mark? And to me, that's intimidating. Because it's easier to argue. But Jesus is so good to us. He doesn't just say, hey, make sure you love everybody really well and check out, right? He's like, I'm going to help you. I know this is going to be hard. I'm going to help you. And so he gives us some help. And if you've got a Bible with you, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 4. But before you get there and before we look at that story, we're going to have to actually back up about a year before that time because some pretty incredible things happened. Matthew 4, like I said, we'll get there in just a second, is a story of Jesus' encounter with a set of brothers. And if you've followed the Bible around a little bit, you might know one brother's name was Andrew and the other brother's name was Simon. And this day that we're going to read about on the beach was a defining day in their life. It was a huge day. It was a difference-making day. But it wasn't the first day. It wasn't the first time Jesus had interacted with them. And while Jesus invites them to something, he actually invites them to come and become someone else. The thing that really just sticks out more than anything else is it was really a series of invitations. It was a series of interactions Jesus had with them. He helped them get to the place where they could become someone else. And so to catch you up, it was about a year before this day on the beach that we're going to read about, that Andrew was following a man named John the Baptist. Andrew was taken with John the Baptist because he was charismatic. He was fiery. He was interesting. He wasn't afraid of anybody. And Andrew was just kind of captured by this man. And he followed him around. And one day, as Andrew was hanging out with John the Baptist, Jesus came by. And John kind of surprised everybody. He said, I know you've been listening to me and I know you've been following me, but he's the one. He's the one you need to follow. And Andrew, I love Andrew. He took it literally. He got up and he started walking and he just started following him, kind of like a little stalker. I mean, he's just walking behind Jesus. And the first conversation we see between Jesus and Andrew, Andrew's been following Jesus literally behind him for a little while. And Jesus finally turns around and is kind of like, can I help you? You know? And Andrew's response, I love his response. He's like, where are you staying? He's inviting himself over. He's kind of like, where are you heading to? I want to go with you. And Jesus' response shows us so much. He says, why don't you come and see? Why don't you come and see? Yeah, the very first invitation that Jesus issued to Andrew was an invitation to belong. The first invitation is to belong. He says, why don't you come and hang out with me? Why don't you spend some time with me? And he does. He spends the whole day with him. And Andrew is so impressed. He is so taken with this day that he spends with Jesus that he goes and gets his brother Simon. And he says, Simon, tomorrow you got to come with me. You got to meet this guy. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but you got to meet him. You got to experience him. You got to be part of this. And he does. Simon goes with him the next day. And Simon and Andrew spend the whole day with Jesus. And Jesus does something very significant for Simon. And this is, guys get this. Guys get this. Ladies, I don't know if it works this way for you. It does for guys. Jesus gives Simon a nickname. And when you get a nickname as a guy, you're in. It's like, I belong now. I got a nickname. He calls him Peter, and we think, well, that's a name. And no. You're thinking like American. In that day and time, it was the equivalent of Rocky. He's like, I'm going to start calling you Rock, man. That's your new name. And all of a sudden, Peter realized, Jesus just invited me to belong, to be part of his life. He had a place for me. And Jesus does the same for you. Sometimes we think that Jesus' invitation to us is too big and too hard. I have to make too many changes. But did you know that really the first invitation that Jesus makes to most of us is, why don't you just come and find out? Why don't you come and see? Because I have a space for you. I have room for you in my life. I want you with me. The very first invitation is to come and belong. Well, the second invitation is to believe. The second invitation is to believe. And so a few days after this, Peter and Andrew have been hanging out with Jesus, and Jesus has kind of collected some other people too, and all of a sudden there's this little group rolling around, and there's a wedding that's about to happen in this little town that they live in. Jesus and his mom have been invited, and so he invites his guys. He goes, hey guys, we're going to the wedding, so come on. I mean, we're already doing life together. Let's do this together too. And so they go to this wedding. Now, in that day and time, and you can read all about this in John chapter 2, but in that day and time, weddings literally involved almost the whole town, especially in a small town, and they often went on for a week or 2 weeks of the party and the celebration and everything that went with it. And so they come to this wedding, and about halfway through the wedding, they've run out of wine. And it's a bad thing to run out of anything at a wedding, but it's a bad thing to run out of wine, and the problem gets dropped in Jesus' lap. And they're like, we're out of wine, what should we do? Jesus really doesn't want anything to do with it, but finally, he says, okay, I can fix this. And he tells the servants, go get some pots, fill them up with water. And somehow he turns the water to wine. Now here's the kicker in all of this, to me at least anyway. Nobody else knew. The only people that knew he had done anything were the servants who carried the pots and that little group that he had invited to belong. They saw it happen. And the way John describes it when he writes this down, looking back years later, he goes, that was the first time. That was the first sign, the first thing that Jesus did when we absolutely knew there's something different. It says that disciples believed him for the first time. So his first invitation was belong, come and hang out with me, I have room for you. His second invitation was believe. Believe that I'm different. And it's the same for us. He issues the exact same invitation to us. He says, listen, I know you've experienced a lot of things. I know you've seen a lot of things, but let me show you who I am. And when we see who he is, we realize he's different. There's something different about him. And there's an invitation to put your trust in him and to find your confidence in him. That's the second invitation. Now, about a year later, is the day on the beach in Matthew chapter 4. Peter and Andrew have found that they belong with Jesus. Peter and Andrew have reached a place where they've seen him do so many things they can't explain, and they trust him, and they are following him, and they believe him. And now comes another invitation. Look at Matthew chapter 4, verse 18. It says, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, called Peter, and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. In other words, they were at work. They were doing their regular day, their regular stuff. Verse 19, come follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. And at once, They left their nets and they followed him. Stop there. This is massive. So I don't know what your day-to-day is like. But let me just for a moment paint this picture for you. Let's say that you are have kind of come to the place where you realize that Jesus has a place for you, that he matters, and you have begun to trust him. You've begun to see him as important. If he rolls into wherever you work, while you're working, whatever it is you're doing, and says, I know you've been doing this. I know your life has been about this, but I'm inviting you to something else. I'm inviting you to become different people. I'm not interested in just belonging. That's a good thing, and I'm glad you feel accepted, and I want you to know that you always have a place with me. I'm excited that you're beginning to believe, that you started to understand who I am and that I'm different and that maybe there's something else here, and you started to trust me a little bit. Now, I'm asking you to become someone else, to leave all the other stuff behind. He was talking to fishermen. He goes, I know you used to fish. I'm going to take what you used to do and I'm going to put it to a different purpose. I'm going to change who you are. I want you to become someone else. And this invitation, don't misunderstand this invitation. It's easy to read that and think, well, gosh, they're probably poor guys and they just fish. And so what are they really leaving? What are they giving up? See, Jesus' invitation to become was everything. See, if you want to think of it this way, belonging and believing were the start line. Jesus is asking them, okay, now let's run. Let's run for the finish line. Let's become who you were created to be. Let's become the kind of person that is marked, that is known by, that is tattooed with this idea that the way you know them is because they love so well. Jesus wasn't asking to be a side hustle. He didn't want to be a hobby. He wasn't asking to be part of their life. He was asking them to make him the point of their life. And he makes that same invitation to us. He starts with belonging. He says, I want you to know that you can belong. And I hope you've experienced that here at Mountain Ridge, that we have a place for you, that we love you, we value you, and we want you to feel at home here. And then as Jesus begins to show you who he is, he invites you to believe that I am different, that there is something to this, that you can trust me, that I can cover your past, I'm going to be with you in the present, and I've got hold of your future. You can believe that. And then I want you to become someone else, someone who's marked, who's tattooed, who's branded, different than everybody else. And if you keep reading, you'll find that Andrew and Peter weren't. They said yes. Yes, let's become somebody else. But they didn't, at least not at first. Peter and Andrew, they argued. They put themselves first. They were prideful. They were racially and religiously prejudiced against other people. They fought with each other. They fought with the other followers of Jesus. They were constantly trying to push their way to the front, to be the first, to be the most important. Peter cut a dude's ear off, right? But over time, through the process of following Jesus, they became different men. They became men who were known for their love. No matter what everybody else said about them, no matter what conceptions or preconceived notions that other people had, they were known as people who loved. They had become the people that God created them to be. And he makes that exact same invitation to you. And what's fascinating about this to me is every one of us is different. Every one of us has a different life and a different set of choices and a different kind of set of experiences that happen to us that God uses to draw us to himself, that God uses to invite us to become someone else. But there's also some things that we have in common. There's some things that happen to all of us. Like every one of us has some common experiences that help us become the person that God created us to be. The person who's marked and branded and known, not for their labels, not for what everybody else says, but for the fact that they love so very, very well. So, what are they? What are these things? Well, I can share a couple of them with you. But one of the biggest experiences that we have, and we get to choose this experience, and it drives who we become. There's so many people, when you talk to them, what made the difference for you? What was it that helped you become a different person? What is it that's helping you move forward? Because it's about progress, not perfection. But what is it that helped you make progress when you started on this journey to become someone else? And so many people will say, when I got baptized. when I got baptized. It is baptism that made an impact on me. And if you haven't been here before, baptism, the mechanics of it are very simple. We dunk somebody in a tank of water and bring them right back up. Most of the time. No, we always do. And really, what's behind it is it's symbolic that I used to be one way. I lived one life. I died to that old life. I buried it, and now I've raised up to live a new life. But there's something else that's incredibly powerful about it. It is a declaration to everyone else that I am different. And so many people will say, when I got baptized, something changed. My faith expanded. I started becoming more of who I think God created me to be. I started finding myself loving other people because I was willing to publicly say, my life is now about following Jesus. So for many of us, baptism is one of those experiences that drives us forward. Another experience that so many people talk about is the experience of loving God. And I have to be honest with you, for a long time when I heard people say, I love God, I kind of thought to myself, I was like, are you giving him a hug? Are you mowing the grass? Are you taking him to the airport? I mean, how exactly is it that you are loving God? I don't even know what that means. But over time, I realized loving God simply means this, that I'm participating in a relationship with him. This isn't head knowledge. This isn't something off to the side. This isn't when I get to it. This is the core, foundational relationship in my life. And you know what? Your relationship with God is different than every other relationship you have, but there are some commonalities. And one of those commonalities is it's built on communication. You can't really have a relationship with somebody if you never communicate with them. And our relationship with God, the way we love God, so many people have told me over and over and over that when I started reading the Bible and I heard God speak to me, that's when things changed. That when that conversation started, where God started speaking to me because I was reading his word and I started praying and I started talking back to God, not just help me have a good day and get a good parking spot, but actually started sharing what's going on in my life. And all of a sudden, my faith just blew up. I understood what it meant now to become somebody else. That idea of loving God by reading his word and talking to him, it made a massive difference in my life and it started changing me. So baptism, loving God. Another one is relationships. For so many of us, our relationships become so key, so foundational. And I think for most of you, if you've been following Jesus for a while, you can run back through the memories in your mind and you can point to a person or a group or a small group of people that you say, they were very important in my life. They made a big difference in my following Jesus. Whether it was one-on-one where they discipled me, or it was a small group like our community groups where we did life together, or it was another group of people that just poured into me and helped me, and allowed me to love them and serve them and walk with them. And God used this person. And I hear it over and over and over. God used my community group. God used my wife. God used my friend. And he changed me. He showed me something. It made a massive impact in my life. And these are experiences that you can choose to have. And these experiences are the things that drive who you become. And the last one is serving. And I don't know what it looks like out in the rest of the world. I do know what it looks like here at Mountain Ridge. And it's so funny, and it's not funny, but it's kind of ironic, I guess, is a better way to say it. It's ironic what people say when they talk about serving. Because the story, it is their story, but in one sense, everybody's story is the exact same. And here's kind of how it goes. Whether it was, hey, I'm going to start serving in our kids ministry, and I want to invest in kids, or I'm going to really pour into our high school and junior high students, or I want to help lead adults. I want to go on this mission trip. I want to help one of our community partners. Whatever it is, there's lots of different ways you can serve. But it's funny because the story is almost always the same. I don't know why I said yes. I don't know if I felt guilty or whatever. They asked if I would, and I said yes. And then as soon as I started doing it, I thought, they've got the wrong person. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't feel like I can handle this. This is way outside of my league and my comfort zone, and I'm not even sure what I'm doing. But then I did it anyway. And it's so amazing because I started off trying to help somebody else, and it changed me. It impacted me. It blew up my faith. It expanded my faith. It changed everything about this walk with God when I started to have the experience of serving other people. And these experiences are so important. We're going to spend the next several weeks talking about each one. Next week, we're talking about baptism and what it is and why we do it. And we're going to celebrate baptisms as well. We have people that we're going to baptize next week and just talk about how that experience is so impactful and such a difference maker for so many when it comes to becoming the person that Jesus has invited you to be. When it comes to becoming that person that no matter what everybody else says, the one thing about you that nobody can seem to deny is they love really, really well. I don't agree with them. I don't know that I'd make the choices that they make. I think they're a little crazy about some of the stuff they say, but they love so, so well. I was at a funeral yesterday. A lady named Marcia Stowe. If you've been around Mountain Ridge for a long time, you might know Marcia. She's battled illness for a long time. And it was amazing to watch people that had known her a long time, people that had known her a short time, people that had known her most of her life. And as they shared, and I got to be honest with you, I've done a lot of funerals, and you can tell when people are laying it on, right? I mean, you can. It sounds bad, but sometimes people are just trying to say nice things because they don't know what else to say. And you can also tell when it's incredibly sincere. And yesterday, it was so sincere as person after person basically told the exact same story. Oh, the details were different. Well, when we lived in Flagstaff, or when she was my neighbor, or, she was my grandmother, or, whatever it was. But the bottom line was always the same. She just loved us so well. She just loved us. So it is possible. You can become that person. Because if you're like me and you look at that challenge and you think, that's too far, that's too hard, I can't do that. You can. Not on your own. But in following Jesus, you can become that person. And if you step all the way back, it's true all the way across the board, isn't it? The belong, believe, become. You think about when you were going to school for the first time, your first day at school, your first day on the job, maybe when you met the new family that you were getting ready to become a part of. What was one of your first questions? In essence, it was, do I belong here? Can I find anybody here that will let me sit with them, that will talk to me, that will treat me like I'm valuable? Do I belong here? And as soon as you realized that you belong, the very next question you had was about belief. Do I believe that these people actually care about me? Do I believe that I have a future here? And as soon as that question was answered, I belong here, and I do believe, you started to become a part of that family, or a member of that class, or a part of the club or the group, or whatever it was that you were getting connected with. And if it works like that in something as small as school or job or a club at school, multiply that by 100 when it comes to your connection with God. He says, you belong with me. And I hope you've experienced that, like I said, here at Mountain Ridge, because we say it, we're for you. We're on your place, on your side. We've got a place for you. Jesus invites you to believe, see that he's different. And then he asks you to become someone else. And I'm excited because as we go over this over the next several weeks, we're going to have the opportunity to choose these experiences that help us become those people. And it makes so much sense, doesn't it? I'm not that concerned about the labels, and I hope you aren't either. But I do care a lot about the brand. I do want people to know me, I want them to know you, and I want them to know Mountain Ridge. Well, those are the people that love really well. I don't always agree with them. I don't necessarily like what they say about this or that. I don't think that they're right when it comes to these kind of things or morality or these other things, but man, you can't deny the fact that they seem to love people really, really well. Let's be those people. Let's become who Jesus invites us to be. Would you pray with me?